Hi everyone, welcome to the latest and greatest episode of Failing Up. Today I had the absolute honor of sitting down with Steve LeVine, the journalist from The Information who writes the newsletter The Electric. In this episode we talk about everything revolving the escalating rare earth mineral trade war between the US and China. In this episode you'll find out if they need one another, which competitive edge the US and China has, and how we see this playing out in the near future. I feel like my brain is absolutely full of all this new information, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I have. Okay, so I'm super excited to have you on, and I first wanted to get down into what feels like a super complicated series of events going on, but I think I want to start by rewinding it. So I did some research and realized that in the 1990s and the early 2000s, the US focused more on clean air and cheaper imports versus China that took on the pollution and the cost. And now they control around 90% of rare earth mineral processing worldwide. My question for you is, how has wanting cheap goods led us to being in this position? Were there really big policy missteps that you think we took that we shouldn't have done early on?
I think yes. The short answer is yes, but it's less. I think it was a lot less intentional than maybe it looks like now. Remember at that time, well, leading up, Mao dies in the 1970s. You get Deng Xiaoping, and then this opening up of China, the change of the economic policy, and the idea that the West can bring China into the family of nations, and we're thinking politics, we're thinking economics is the instrument to bring around the politics, and so that's kind of how that transpired. There was a very vigorous effort in China to bring around the economy. That started in the 80s, but really the 90s with some vigor. And remember, Deng very famously said in 1992, the Middle East has oil, we have rare earths, and so he launched that policy. We're going to capture that space. The shipment, what's now known as the export of American manufacturing abroad. That the consensus now is that somehow it was triggered by the 2001 China entry into WTO. It started way before that, right? The U.S. manufacturing started moving abroad really in the late 1970s and into the 80s. So by the time you get to the age you're talking about, the 2000s or so, this has happened. A ship has sailed, right?
Okay.
And right, and there's the Rust Belt is there, right? The whole Ohio River Valley, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, all of those towns have lost their industries by then, and this is an economic thing, right? These companies, are looking for cheap labor. That's the big driver.
Oh, interesting, because there was the argument that I heard yesterday that the reason why we stopped focusing on these mines was because it was a Democratic problem. It was the Democrats that wanted to focus on clean energy and all that stuff. So that's not true.
Well, it's news to me. I mean, I suppose I would have to think about it, but I have not read that. I
Okay, good to know.
I haven't seen that myself. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. And so, in talking about us outsourcing a lot of the cheap labor, given everything that's happening right now, we just implemented the $100,000 cost for H-1B visas. Is that something that you think will onshore U.S. jobs again? What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, I think it's a big mistake.
How
It's
come?
a huge mistake. So when you read about what made great nations, great civilizations great, and this goes all the way back to the Greeks and the Romans and the Ottomans, and pick your empire. A common feature shared by these was an openness to immigration and reliance on outside skills to sort of mix in with your own, and just sort of take the best from everywhere. And part of that is people running away from wherever they are. Look at the Enlightenment, right? In Europe, you had these wisest minds fleeing from whatever country that happened to be, and it wasn't always the same countries, but and then when they get where they're going, whether it's Vienna or Paris or London, just producing this flowering of knowledge, the scientific revolution, and then the industrial revolution. Well, that same story played out here. Now we're saying, we're going to charge you, person who's fleeing, place X, $100,000 to come into the United States. Are we going to get those people? We don't know who the next Einstein is. Einstein being one of these immigrants, right? Who came to the United States.
Yeah.
And so I think this whole thing, I mean, there is something to it, but uh, we're on a road to choking off the nourishment of what has made our economy great.
Yeah, I think I agree with that because I read that over 50% of Fortune 500 CEOs slash founders are immigrants or the children of illegal immigrants slash immigrants. So it's a super high percentage. And a lot of the smartest people I know, yes, are American, but they're also from international countries. But I was wondering, how do you protect those? I think the $100,000 was a far stretch, but there had been reports of employees abusing the people that they had approved for the H-1. How do you prevent that from happening? What, in your opinion, what's the most optimal solution if it's not this?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So I don't know what the optimal solution is. I would say that first you had leading into like 2020, 2021, 2022, these Indian outsourcing companies like Infosys gaming the system and ending up with the bulk of the H-1B visas. And now you've got the big like Amazon and Microsoft. They're gaming the system, and they get the bulk of these visas. So I think some kind of a smart system where is it that there's a cap on the number you can get, or some kind of a funnel, so you don't end up with this abuse. I mean, there are abuses. I, I recall, when I wrote my last book, the one on batteries. You would get two sides of the coin here. Hiring senior battery researchers when they had a spot to fill. They put out a call for resumes, and they would say most of the resumes they got were from uh, people from China or India or Ukraine, whatever, and very few American-born Americans. But then when you talk to Americans in those labs, they would say, we're being choked out of, no, we're being choked out of these jobs, and they're doing this to keep salaries low. So there is a middle ground here, but the middle ground isn't, demonizing, the whole class of human beings who are, would-be immigrants, and putting, this very high hurdle on immigrants coming into the United States. And by the way, that Thomas Friedman, came up with this idea. Every foreigner who gets a PhD in the United States should have a visa, a permanent green card and visa stamped on their diploma, right? Keep these people in the United States.
Actually, I think that's a great idea. I've never heard of that before. I think that's a brilliant idea. So, focusing back on the mineral reliance. So, as of today, correct me if I'm wrong, the US has 100% import reliance on 12 rare earth minerals, some of which are used especially in defense, in satellites, F 35 jets, and mostly sourced from China. What are some policy missteps that the US has taken that have affected our current situation for which we've become super reliant on China for these minerals?
Yeah. So, just broadening that out a bit. So, almost 100% reliant on Chinese processed rare earths. Even when rare earths are mined in the United States, there is a
We
company
have to
out in
process.
California, MP Minerals, but it has to ship its rare earths to China to be processed and turned into magnets.
Is that because is it like a super high energy thing to do? I know nothing about processing. So
And dirty.
it
And dirty.
oh, okay.
High energy and the chemicals that are used. But they're rectifying that, right? They're building a plant in Texas that will process this stuff and turn out the metals. But that's the case now. We have learned uh, in really the last 2 3 years that a lot of the policies that were taken as an article of faith, like free trade, is all good, and we should, comparative advantage. The theory of comparative advantage. The country that's the best at doing a certain economic thing should do that, and you should focus on what you're good at. Well, that's a race to we've discovered that's a race to the bottom because you also end up hollowing out the middle of your country and making a lot of people unhappy and so part of that was there's that comparative advantage and there's NIMBYism, right? So
What is that?
we want not in my backyard, right?
Ah,
So
okay.
so yeah, we want electric cars, we want iPhones, name your device, but we don't want the industries that are required to produce those things in our county, in our state, and it also makes us angry. So you're in New York City,
Mhm.
I'm in Washington D.C. It makes us angry when we hear that they're mining for nickel in North Dakota. Why? Why are we angry about that? Right? But that's kind of how this has gone. We've driven out mining from the United States and processing. Right? China's strength. It doesn't itself have a lot of these minerals, a lot of the metals that we're talking about today, the ones that give it a geopolitical stranglehold now uh, on the United States, but on the West, on China, on South Korea. It has a stranglehold on the processing of these minerals. So
Got it.
even when it imports, it secures lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, whatever from the DRC or South America or Australia. It brings all of that stuff into China and processes the primary processing all the way up through all of the components. China has spent the last 30 years stacking up its expertise and its control over the whole value chain. And so when the US is trying to take back, trying to loosen that grip, that's what it really means. And it's a years long process. We really got to do it, but not think that it's an overnight uh, process. And it means that we've got to be smarter than simply throwing up a ring fence and declaring trade war on the world until we get those industries built, we're still reliant on China.
So you do think decoupling is possible?
That okay, that's another question. Do I think it's possible? Um, so there's two questions. Is it possible? And then is it wise?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's wise to take control of your future by having a certain percentage uh, production capacity for your main strategic things. Decoupling completely, I think, is not possible, and also not not really wise.
But in the US, I feel like every single administration, sometimes it feels like the 4 years are spent undoing the what the 4 years prior did, vice versa. And so I'm wondering, how is this plan going to be successful if, let's say, hypothetically, Democrats come into power after Trump's term is over? Wouldn't they just work on undoing everything, just like Trump undid the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, he wants to deforest Alaska, all that stuff. So how do we do that in a way that's feasible and bipartisan?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we know how to be respectful of each other.
We
I mean,
don't.
yeah.
Not
I mean,
anymore.
yeah. We spend. It's pretty incredible. Like it used to be. Look at the Supreme Court, right? It used to be there. There is actually a rule, right? I mean, sort of a norm, a practice. You respect prior rulings unless there's something incredibly major, like the Dred Scott case was overturned because it was incredibly racist. But this Supreme Court just rolls over, just does not respect
Yeah.
anything that has come before it. And I think that's the case on a number of fronts, like you just described. We do need, if this is going to be successful, I mean, if we're sticking to the question of critical minerals and the geopolitics of critical minerals, it's a multi-administration process. Like we're talking 15 years, 20 years uh, to get this done, to get us back where we should be, and that's with the minerals and the processing and the manufacturing, and we don't need to do it all ourselves, right? Like it's we've forgotten we have allies, right? Right? It can be U.S. and friends, right? So Indonesia, for example, the Biden administration. This drove me crazy. Indonesia has the largest deposits of nickel on the planet, and it is the largest producer of it. It not only has the nickel, but production of it, and is kind of a captive of China, right? So, however, they didn't want to be a captive of China, and the president of Indonesia came to the United States 2 or 3 times, went to the White House, went down to Texas, saw Elon Musk, with the idea, make me, make the country of Indonesia part of your strategy, your strategy to build electric cars, to build up your industries. And we could not get past that their environmental policies and their labor policies didn't conform to whatever the United States thought they should be. Well, we're not going to change everyone's how they run their country, but we could say, okay, you can be part of the plan. Any place that's producing the stuff that we use has to conform to international standards, labor and environmental standards. And we still haven't, we still haven't pulled Indonesia into our sphere.
I know China is deeply, deeply involved in all parts of Africa. I remember when I was in, I believe it was Tanzania and Namibia, there were a lot of locals that were talking about how there's a bunch of coal factories being built. I don't know much past that, but there's been a lot of crying out on in the US saying this is extremely unethical. They're basically buying out a country that's going to default on all its loans, blah, 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 all this stuff. Is the US doing something like that similar with Argentina, or is that completely misunderstood?
So that's a debt deal, right? Where the U.S. is prepared to bail out. We by the way, we bail out Argentina at least once every decade,
Oh,
right?
I had no idea.
They've got a crisis there. Yeah, another one thing on top of the other. So it's the latest one. I do think that you're right. So the U.S. has fallen down. Sticking with Africa for a moment, in really letting China, get in the inside lane on the Chinese on the African economy, and that has to do with any kind of mineral you can think of, and the yes, the Chinese go in there with these kinds of projects that you're talking about, building ports, coal industries, railroads, electric power, but this is how you make friends and influence people, right? This is what these countries want, and yes, um, it's a debt. Those countries owe China all those tens and hundreds of millions of dollars for those projects. That's the downside. Well, what is the U.S. doing? Let's compete, right?
So, how can the US compete?
Well, all right. So one of the countries that China took, almost full control of is Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, and its strategic commanding heights is cobalt. So it has by far the largest reserves of cobalt in the world, and
And can you remind us really quick why cobalt is
yeah,
so important?
yeah, I was just going to say that. So cobalt is is not widely dispersed. Only a few countries have it. It's crucial in a lot of products, military goods, and also batteries. Right? It's a it one of the things that it does is its energy density is very, very high. And so for example, your smartphone is a battery, most of whose energy comes from the cobalt in it.
Oh,
Very high
interesting.
cobalt in it, yeah. And it's since it's kind of scarce, then it's also expensive. And Chinese companies went in there, with the state behind, and grab control of most of the mines. And there were American companies there, like Freeport McNamara was there, but they ran into trouble in another part of the world, and so sold their mine to the Chinese. Well, these countries, they're not stupid, so they don't want to be beholden to one country. But if the U.S. if there isn't another country there whose companies are providing balance, then they go for it. But something's happened. So I mean, it's a little bit complex, but I can make it short. Basically, Rwanda, which neighbors the DRC, got behind a rebellion in the DRC, backed these rebels, and really causing instability problems
Against
there.
the Chinese as well? Or was this
No,
just nationwide?
against the DRC, against
Okay.
the DRC. So the DRC approached the Trump administration and said, "Hey, look, if you will help us to end this conflict, basically, bring in your military force, you can have," and named this mine that was a big one, cobalt, controlled by the Chinese. You can have it. Basically, we will take that away from the Chinese, and you can bring in some uh, American company, and they can have the reserves. Well, the tr Trump didn't bring the military in, but he brought in I won't be able to give chapter and verse, but basically came in effectively militarily and satisfied this and this demand or request by the DRC, and the U.S. now has the prospects of, it's not a sealed deal at the moment, but the prospects of getting cobalt reserves in the
But
DRC.
but why wouldn't China just take care of that themselves? Why, especially now, would they be willing at all to give a cobalt mine up? Is it because they have such a large share already, or is it because
First, I mean, the first thing to know is that you know uh, these deals, a deal in, let's say, the DRC is not like a deal in the United States. It really does rely on the favor of the government. And what was the DRC looking for? They were looking for geopolitical balance. And you know what? It could be, I don't know. It could be that the government did seek Chinese help first, but as far as I know, there is no place on the earth where Chinese, well, no, I shouldn't say there is no, hang on. I think there is no, I was just going to say maybe Ukraine is a different matter, but I think there's no place on the earth in which Chinese have stepped in militarily to help someone. Can you think of one?
no? And you know a lot more than me, so
Yeah, no, I don't think there is. Yeah, yeah.
okay. And so in Africa, how do you see that playing out in the next 10 to 20 years? So you said it'll take around 15 years for us to become more sufficient. What percentage of that sufficiency or self-reliance is going to be coming from the US versus its allies or potential allies? And who might those allies be?
Yeah, this won't work. It won't work unless it's a U.S. and allies solution. So the idea that's there now, that somehow this is going to be, all U.S. Is misled, and
Yeah.
you kind of saw that in recent days when Trump signed a rare earths deal with Australia. He understands it. So you, you know, it's pretty clear what the solution is. The solution is that the minerals, the metals come from everywhere. Um, North America, Africa, South America, Australia has incredible deposits of, cobalt, nickel, rare earths, and and possibly processed in those countries too. Or you can build processing in the United States. But the way that you bring balance to the global control over strategic minerals is by including everyone who's not China in that process.
And who is China partnering with any of their allies? I'm assuming Russia now on minerals, rare earth minerals, or are they solo?
Well, yeah, it's on rare earths. It's pretty much solo. So they get their rare earths locally and process them locally. Now there are cases like Malaysia's rare earths. We've already said MP Materials rare earths go to China to be processed. Um, and then it's partnerships in other metals like lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper. Those are contracts, right? Where it's operating in the lithium triangle of South America in Brazil, Australia, um, Indonesia, and then those metals and minerals are sent back to the motherland.
And sorry, I didn't even ask this question, which I should have because it's a simpler one. But what is the role that rare earths play in technology in general, and why are they so important? That should have been the first question I asked you.
Yeah, it depends on the rare earths, but they have, depending on which metal you're talking about, have an outsized capacity to to do very important things like for example on an airplane propeller. I've seen this on those turbines and on the propellers. They can allow the temperature to go way past the natural melting point of the metals used to make those propellers or turbines without melting. So they just have they're like they have these magical properties in very small quantities. That's the thing about rare earths is that they're not rare. They are around, but they got this name, rare earths, and there are actually 17 of them. The ones that we use, and yeah, I mean, but so they'll be in very small quantities, but when it's something big, like a submarine, for example, they're on these military submarines, they're almost 3 tons of rare earths in one of those submarines. I don't know what that submarine weighs total, but that's probably
How much does that cost to make?
oh, I don't know. I don't know. I have
Oh
no
my
idea.
goodness. And so while the US relies mainly on China for the rare earth exports, doesn't China rely mainly on the US and its trade partners for semiconductors? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, for the high end ones,
So yes, okay. For high-end semiconductors.
two nanometers or less. Yeah.
What steps is China taking to become more independent in that realm? Like what is the equivalent of what we are doing with rare earth minerals that they're doing for chips?
Really started with Biden, right? The kind of a U.S. chokehold on the export of high-end AI chips, for example, and the equipment needed to make them to China. And I don't remember that China responded much under Biden. Perhaps they didn't regard it as much of a threat then, but under Trump, um, they have responded by ginning up the China playbook. And we've seen the China playbook over and over and over again since the 1990s. It's a strategic decision is made. We're going to make this product, and it started with simple things like textiles and car tires, something like that. We're going to own that, right? And then worked its way up the value chain until the products we know now. And the result in China is a scrum, a rush by entrepreneurs to be part of that industry because they know they can earn money. The government is behind that, and that's free electricity, free buildings, free land, right, to get started, loans at very low rates, forgiveness if you screw everything up, right? And so you end up you end up with industry after industry. China ends up in in the driver's seat or in majority control of that industry. And now it has ginned up that same process when it comes to semiconductors and advising the end users of semiconductors, including the high-end ones in China, don't use don't use NVIDIA chips
Yeah, why would
for
they do that? Isn't that shooting themselves in the foot? Because doesn't Nvidia have some of the best chips? Like, is that?
the
I
best
just
chip.
don't understand the logic behind that.
Yeah, because they're encouraging it's in encouragement of encouragement with a capital E, because it's really very strong push. They want local production, and for the very high chips that they can't make, they're finding ways to buy them. It's not really smuggling, but it's kind of smuggling, right? Because the U.S. has banned, the export of those, and it's an international ban, right? Where the U.S. has told other countries you can't transship, like France, you can't buy our 2 nanometer chips and then transship them into China. But they found a way to get them, and there have been there are firms whose whole business is to tear down electronics and other products, and then produce intelligence reports. And companies want to know what other companies, how they made that thing, right? And I mean, that's a whole industry. Well, teardowns have been done of Chinese electronic equipment and found these NVIDIA chips in there. That's why we know this is taking place.
Okay, that's interesting. And Jensen Huang warned that hurting China can harm the US in even worse ways. Do you think that Washington understands the reciprocal risk of tech sanctions? And how has the economic nationalism eclipsed pragmatism?
Yeah. So it's not clear to me that the U.S. understands that China's in the driver's seat. China is in the driver's seat. Right?
Okay.
We have this high-end control over, the very best chips, and not just that. There are a lot of things that the U.S. does that are the very best in the world technologically, and that end up export that China buys. But China has a chokehold over these metals and minerals and batteries and all kinds of components that the U.S. needs for its military and for countless products. If China just decided to totally boycott the U.S., our economy would grind to a halt. That's not overstating.
Really?
That, but,
But then
but
why aren't we acting like I feel like the US, I'll name names, Trump especially, is not acting like he's taking that into consideration. Like he'll tweet something, the president of China is being an idiot. He doesn't want to see his country fall apart. Blah blah blah. That doesn't. That doesn't sound like the situational awareness of someone who understands what's at risk here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so okay, so what's on the other balance? So you've got this on the other side of the scale
Yeah.
is that we buy a lot of stuff, right? China sells a lot of stuff to us. Its companies rely to a large degree on the United States economy. If the US and let's say its allies too, conversely stopped buying Chinese stuff, their economy would suffer, would grind to a halt, right? They just and this was piling stuff. So I I would say that in that balance, that again, I would still say that China has the upper hand, and not by a little bit.
Oh, really? So it's by a lot.
I think by a lot. And one of the things I wanted to mention, because it was in the, if you don't mind my bringing up a note that was one of the sentences that was in the script notes.
Mhm.
It was talking about what China brings to the table, what the U.S. brings to the table, and it was suggesting that the U.S. brings the smarts to the t table.
Yeah, yeah. So I can explain the analogy really fast that I thought of, which please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like China bring it, if the global economy is a human body, then the US is more of the brains and then China is more of the bones and the muscle. Obviously, all these other countries are included, but that's what I thought of.
Yeah,
What do you think of that?
I think that for a long time it was true, and it's no longer true.
Okay.
It's not true by a long shot. So Chinese there was just a report, in fact, that came out just like a day or two ago. I just saw it today. It was by an Australian intelligence think tank, and you know Chinese they looked at 65 technological industries, and China uh, had technological dominance in like 55 of them.
What?
I'm, I, yeah,
Where's this data from? Because everything I look at in in the US from US publications, I'm sure, says that the US leads, especially in market caps of the biggest companies, the biggest fundraisers, all these things. I guess financially we're
well,
leading.
those are not. Yeah, though you haven't said anything about smarts yet. That's
That's true. So maybe yeah, I'm looking at this the wrong way. So if you could reorganize the body composition of the global economy, how would you describe China in the US?
I would say that the China is increasingly the United States's equal intellectually.
Okay.
Yeah, and that means the number of patents doesn't matter that much, because you can patent you can patent things, but the quality of patents, and there's a way that people who watch patents um, judge the quality of it, and it has to do with citations by other people. The quality of Chinese patents, you know, have reached or surpassed American patents in a number of industries. So the U.S. is generally regarded as superior in AI and biotech, quantum, right? Quantum technology. So there, there are industries, semiconductors, right? No one can touch NVIDIA, no one, and of course, but China's kind of, our island is getting smaller, right? The water is coming up on the shore, right? The number of industries that we're still superior in is shrinking. And meanwhile, everything is manufactured there or elsewhere. Like, we lost the knowledge until recently. We definitely understand it now. Like, this is, everyone talks about this, that a lot of innovation happens in the factory, right? First, the the semiconductor is invented, and then it is improved in the factory. You're making the semiconductors. You've got all of these workers there, and you've got their supervisors, and they're figuring out, well, oh, if we do that, it'll be faster. If we do that, it'll be better. We can put more, we can put more transistors on that chip, and so on. And this is with batteries. It's with cars. Name your kind of technology. And so we need to understand, right? We need to deal with China and lose our superiority attitude. Yeah, we have to be. We could, we could take on some humility.
But what would humility bring us and do for us right now?
We would be smarter about, like, okay, let me give you an example. So Chinese, the field that I know best, which is batteries, right? So Chinese companies, CATL and BYD make the best batteries, the best lithium-ion batteries in the world. That's by quality, and they can do it the fastest at the greatest scale without mistakes, without defects. Well, so we want to be able to do that, but we don't know how to do that right now, right? And so we can make great batteries. Like the batteries of the future are being invented in the United States, right? So why don't we pull a jujitsu on China from the 1990s and invite CATL to come into the United States and hire tens of thousands of Americans and teach us how to make batteries at scale.
Why don't we do that?
Why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? That's my question.
Why aren't you in the office right now? What's going on?
Yeah, and so I mean that's for sure we should be doing that. That's
But
for
but no,
sure.
but my question is, why haven't previous administrations thought of this? Or why isn't the current administration? I feel like Trump is taking an extremely aggressive approach. So I wrote down a couple of the initiatives just so people can understand. So the Pentagon is going to build a 1 billion stockpile of rare minerals. We're reopening mines and refineries for rare earth separation, fast tracking them to 2026. I read in your recent newsletter, we're launching potential deep sea mining operations, all that stuff. So why haven't we thought of something like that?
No, the okay. So this goes back. He is so the Biden administration started this right with the two programs run out of the DOE and like $600 or $700 billion put behind this.
Oh, so this wasn't started by Trump? A lot of these initiatives weren't started.
Well, but he reoriented it, right?
Oh, okay, good to know.
So Biden's was for was geared toward the clean energy.
Mm-hmm.
Trump's is geared toward the military.
So
yeah, all of this is, how can we help the new Department of War, which is what we call it now? How can we do what's strategically necessary to make sure that our military has what it needs. But one thing that Trump has done, and this goes back to his first term. Remember when we had COVID, and I'm forgetting the name of it. Oh, Operation Warp Speed, right? To get the COVID vaccine,
mm-hmm.
right? And he guaranteed these companies, whatever you do, we will buy. I don't remember, but it was like a lot of doses, like 1 billion doses. We will buy, and here's the money up for. Gave them all kinds of money up front. Well, it wasn't just minutes. It seemed like minutes before we had a vaccine. Like it was thought that it would take years to produce a vaccine, and we had it almost overnight. And I think this is how he's behaving now in this administration, right? He's saying, I want these deals post haste. I want the stuff. I want the money in these people's hands and the mine started and the processing. So I think he's moving at the kind of speed that Biden guys made a mistake. It was this, that they thought they had all the time in the world.
Yeah.
They barely spent any of their money, right? Because they're being so careful about making sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. Whereas if you want to win, you got to be prepared, to make some mistakes.
Yeah. And so I really want to jump back to Taiwan for a second. So I feel like Biden was a little bit more. There's an argument that has been said that the only reason why China is not attacking Taiwan is because Trump is in charge. Do you believe that to be true?
No.
No. Okay. Explain why. And if you could, because I personally don't know a lot about the Taiwan situation. I know they're responsible for a lot of the semiconductor production, but why are we so tied to them and them not being invaded? And what could be triggered if they do get invaded by China?
Right. So this is a relic of the Cold War. So so the Chinese nationalist Chiang Kai-shek in the 30s and 40s, um, we backed him against Mao and the communists, and then he was beaten, and Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists fled to Taiwan. We're like, that's our ally. 1949. That's why we are
Okay.
still backing Taiwan, stemming from that.
Oh, I had no idea. I thought it was all tied to semiconductors.
But the semiconductors thing started TSMC. I believe that Morris Chang started TSMC. Wasn't that in like it was like in the late 90s or something like that. So it's quite that's like 4 decades later.
Interesting.
But okay, but you know that so we're backing Taiwan in 1972. The current policy, 1972, Nixon goes to China, meets Mao. That's when the opening happened. Until then, we didn't recognize China. We recognized Taiwan, and an agreement. It was, I'm forgetting what we called it, but it was sort of basically you agree to disagree, right? So we agreed like not to explicitly back Taiwan, and they agreed. I think they agreed, that there would be this strategic, like,
Partnership?
no, not a partnership, a strategic, like they don't attack and we don't sort of,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we don't, yeah, and so
But
that's, yeah, no, but you asked, is Trump the reason? Well, Trump has been president. Is it 9 months?
yeah.
If China was going to attack Taiwan, why didn't they do it like 9 months or
That's what I say. I say if they're really going to attack Taiwan, why wouldn't they do it during the Biden administration if the Biden
right,
administration was quote unquote so fragile, you know?
right.
What do you think the likelihood that happens though? Are people freaking out to way too far of an extent, or is this actually realistic that China could attack Taiwan?
I do think yes that it's realistic, but also this has been a question my whole lifetime. So it's not like
Ah, okay.
this apprehension that you're talking about
Has always existed.
has always been here. China would prefer that Taiwan just says, "All right, guys, we confess you guys are the motherland. We're only a product." They would prefer that, but so it's possible that something short of an outright invasion happens because China doesn't want to destroy Taiwan. They would like to take it intact the way that they did Hong Kong.
And that wasn't super peaceful though, I would say.
Are you referring to Tiananmen Square?
No,
What are
I
you
was
referring?
referring to the recent the protests, the
Oh,
protests.
okay. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. But that happened in 1999. I mean, the handover. So I mean, it's been going on for Chinese control of Hong Kong has been with us for over 2 decades. Um, so China, I don't think I think they're very serious. They intend to have control of Taiwan, and that's nowhere near us. It's right next to them.
So, but what are we gonna do? Are we gonna sit here and do nothing, and twiddle our thumbs, or is everything that we're saying? I mean, Trump has made it clear that if Taiwan were to be attacked, that he would take serious repercussions. I'm sure he openly talks about nuking other countries if they do something out of line. So, what would be the approach you think, bear case, bull case, if Taiwan is attacked by China for the U.S.'s reaction?
The bull case or the bear case?
Best case
Um,
scenario, worst case
yeah,
scenario.
the best case scenario is status quo, right? They keep threatening to take it, and we keep saying we're going to defend them. Um, there is not a case where the Chinese say, "All right, you can be independent." I mean, it doesn't look that way now, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't look
yeah,
that
yeah.
way. No, I don't see that scenario. And in a worst case, which I don't think would happen, but there is a case where um, there's a squeeze, right? Where, a siege. right? You surround, the island, and and sort of, intimidate them into, going, going as you wish. Xi Jinping has been president now since 2012, and he intends to, to be
Be there a
there
while.
for a while. I think that, he regards that as he regards that as his crown. Taiwan is not, it's not Ukraine, right? He like Xi Jinping is not going to do a Putin and destroy Taiwan. And I will leave the rest of the like this like scenario to like people who are sort of that's their expertise.
Sounds fair enough. Okay,
Yeah.
so I know we're up on time, but I do have a couple questions from the audience,
Oh yeah.
if you can answer them. So for my friend Chino, he said, what has to happen in the private and public sectors to become more independent from China, not just in rare minerals, but in everything? How can we work together as a country to ensure we achieve independence?
Okay. Well, I presume when he says when Chino says independence, he means relative.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. From anything that we're dependent on China for, how do we become independent?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're not, so we won't be independent, nor should we be independent. But we can make ourselves a lot less dependent. We can make it so we're not. It's not a threat to
Okay.
us that we don't have rare earths. We have to have consistent economic policy. So there has to be some kind of a coherent sort of agreement, like a national agreement among all 330 million Americans has to happen. We're going to stop being mad at each other, at least when it comes to these very strategic things, like who are our allies, who are our enemies. We're going to go, we're from one administration to the other on the strategic things that matter, like this one. We're not going to overturn. We're going to put these things in place so we have a rare earths industry, and the next administration and the one after that will keep that policy going. And I hope, Chino, I hope you're the first one to make sure that that happens.
I think he's working in the battery sector, so I can
Right.
connect you guys.
All right.
And then from Melissa, how does Trump's outburst affect markets in China in comparison to the US? How has Chinese perception changed of the US over time?
So when she says that, when Melissa says this, she means that his uh,
Tweet fits, tweet
his
rages.
tweet and his shouting and everything.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
well, I think,
Unpredictable rage.
yeah, I think people are accustomed by now. It's not 2017 anymore. So I don't think he surprises anyone. But I do think that it's not just that, it's the unpredictability of policy, and uh, abrupt imposition of very high tariffs. So basically being at war with the world, right? And basically saying we have no allies. We only have sort of strategic or tactical friends, um, and you know basically what's in it for me, right? That's the policy. The policy is what's in it for me. And so I think these things really hurt the United States to be seen that way. And it'll be very hard to recover from that, for us to regain trust. We've lost all of our trust.
From
Everyone.
every
No country. Why would any country trust or rely on the United States after what's happened the last 9 or 10 months? here.
Right now, I agree. It would be tough, but I'm hoping in the future, when there's another administration that tries to restore that, they'll be open to having those conversations again.
No, but they're open, but then they'll ask, what's to say that the administration after you won't then reverse what you're saying?
Actually, that's a fair point.
We have
That's such a
established
good.
this is a precedent.
Yeah, we established such a bad precedent that our relationships don't matter. And I feel
Yeah.
like
And
ethics, being polite. I feel like politicians, maybe this is an unfair thing for me to say, but I do feel like because you are a world leader, you should carry yourself in an appropriate way. And I feel like our current administration doesn't do that. They post videos of illegal immigrants being deported with ASMR, which is absolutely unhinged. So yeah, I completely see what you're saying. And that's a very good point that we have set a bad precedent for sure.
so I don't know the answer to that, like how it will be attempted, right? We will try to recover, and then historians will say, well, we've been through this before, things like this before. We've recovered, so I think people will try, and perhaps time will heal, and this period of time will be viewed as an aberration. That's possible.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Two more. From Josh, what is the motive? We might have touched on this, but what is the motive behind China putting in restrictions on importing NVIDIA chips if they want chips? Isn't that counterintuitive? I think you kind of answered that, but if you could answer it
Yeah,
again briefly.
yeah, yeah. It's not counterintuitive if you want to loosen the grip of the person whose fingers are around your neck. And so that's what's happening here. And China is sending a signal: you're less strong in this area than you think you are.
Yeah, it's like we don't need you, you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it's saying that entirely, because they in fact do need the
But you know
they
how
need
it's like in a relationship, it's like, oh no, I don't need you in my life, but you really like the person and you really care about them, and maybe it's one of those. They're codependent lovers and just can't get rid of each other.
Yeah, and you know what? One thing we have not considered, and that's important, is that when it comes to two countries, China and Russia, very, very obviously, Trump is just playing a game. So with everyone else, it seems like he's willing to go to, unlimited tactics or punishments, whatever, to get what he wants. But not with Russia or China. Trump, first of all, is a teddy bear when it comes to Putin. I
What?
mean,
I
Putin
don't
just
understand that.
no one gets it. No one gets it. And if you find out, and please tell me, so no one knows what's going on there. And with Xi Jinping, it's I think it's viewed correctly that this is a game, like these threats, the 100% tariffs, all of that. Trump wants a deal. Trump wants to be viewed equal to Nixon. Nixon went to China, and that's a historic thing. Trump wants his Trump in Beijing moment. He wants to be seen like Nixon.
He wants the Nobel Peace Prize, right?
He also does. I was told, well, sorry, I was not told. I read in the Financial Times when Trump was sitting with Zelensky in the White House, a few days ago for 2.5 hours, that part of what he was ranting about was that he didn't get the Nobel.
No, and I saw the video. He's like, I saved lives. He's like, I saved a lot of lives, and I don't ask for anything. I don't ask for the Nobel Peace Prize or anything. I'm like, you're kind of asking for it. Like, you definitely do want that recognition. And then the last question. So the last question is, how is the China versus the U.S. building their data centers?
Can you restate that?
Yeah. So I think what he's trying to say is, in comparison of how we are building data centers, I guess I'm just re-saying the question. How does the U.S. compare in building them? Efficiency, my guess is efficiency versus China. So I think you kind of touched on this already, which is China went the super vertical industrial route, screw the environment, we're going all in. The US has been a little bit more careful with that. But how do you see that playing out today, given that
Yeah,
Trump is in power?
right, right. But this person is asking specifically about data centers and not the build out of industries, and that's the training of AI, right?
Yes.
Right. And so I don't know the answer to that, and I've not seen any report. The only reporting that we've had is that DeepSeek reached the same level of intelligence as OpenAI did with ChatGPT 4, and without without the same level of compute, much more cheaply than the US did. And so, that's part of the Chinese playbook is that they have this practice, and again, we could learn from this. We should have some humility of taking what other people have done and building on top of that, reiterating until whatever they're doing is faster and cheaper. So I didn't answer the question because I don't know the answer to it, but I did, it is like it's notable, like the deep seek moment is like something we should like think about.
We should take account for.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. It was such a treat to have you. And I'm excited to check in let's say 6 or 7 months and say and see where things are at. Hopefully Taiwan's still Taiwan. And hopefully we're starting to build out those mines.
Well, we might have a deal. I've thought, this whole time, and I wrote this uh, prediction that we do get a grand trade agreement between the U.S. and China, uh, and we do end up with Chinese companies like Chinese battery, Chinese car companies operating in the United States. That's when we should reconnect.
Awesome. Well, if it happens, we definitely will.
Yeah.
Awesome. It was great to have you.